Hello to you. Hello to you. And hello to your brain. You're going to need it. My name is Nora Brooks Blakely, and by the end of our time together, you'll know more about my mother, Gwendolyn Brooks. Who she was, words she wrote, things she thought, and where she got some of the ideas for all those subjects she wrote about. Now, there's listening involved, but that's not all. Oh no! As you learn more about my mother, you'll also have time to write. You see, Gwendolyn Brooks watched the world. She looked at people and everything around people. She learned from the television shows she watched, from family members, people she saw on the streets. She learned from flowers and from clouds and sky. She read newspapers and magazines and read books and books and books on top of books. And now we have the chance to learn from her. Today, I'll read some of her poems and pieces of her poems and tell you a little bit about her life too. And that's where your brain will come in. I'll give you opportunities to write down your own thoughts at the end of our times together. You'll have a whole collection of words and phrases you can use to jumpstart your own poetry, songs, stories, or daydreams for a cold winter's day. Ready? It's time to start your own journeys as world watchers. Get those brains fired up. Here we go. So let me tell you a little about Mama. She was born a long time ago in 1917. She started writing when she was 7 years old. That's right, 7 years old. Along with 20 books of poetry, she also wrote a novel, magazine, newspaper articles, 2 autobiographies. In addition, she edited literary collections and won all kinds of awards. She was the first Black person to ever win the Pulitzer Prize. Look it up. She was a proud Chicagoan and proud of her heritage. She capitalized the letter B in the word Black. But you can learn most of that in a class or by going online. Here's what you don't know. Gwendolyn Brooks was a woman with a lot of loves. She loved words and the content and feel of books. She loved listening and learning. She loved children and the very idea of family. She loved the news, even when she was horrified by it. But that's not all. She also loved tea and jam and fried chicken and Kleenex. She loved soap operas, socializing in her own way, friends, and she loved music from Duke Ellington to James Brown to Moni Love. She loved trees, gray days with soft rain, and she even giggled in early morning phone calls. So, here's your first 2 for you. From time to time, I'm giving you 2 minutes. That's right, 2 minutes to write down some of the ideas that popped into your head as you listened to my mother's poetry. I just told you about some of my mother's loves, her favorite things. In the next 2 minutes, write down some of the things, the places, the people you love, as many as you can. Ready? Go. So now you should have a whole list of loves, done and done. Here's the next question to exercise your brain. Who are you? There are a lot of answers to that question. In some ways, we are our parents. Oh, I can hear some of you now going, nuh-uh, and I'm going to come right back at you and say, uh-huh. That's right. Yes, you are. For instance, my grandmother played the piano, and she was very serious about it. Now, my mother took after her and played the piano, but she had more fun with it. She liked to listen to Ella Fitzgerald and Duke Ellington. Ella would sing songs like But Not For Me, and Duke Ellington would play things on his piano like Satin Doll and Take the A Train. And if you don't know who these people are, you can find them on YouTube. My mother loved playing those songs on our piano. Me? Oh, I don't play the piano. I took lessons for a year or two when I was a kid, and then nothing. Now I wish I had taken my lessons more seriously because I would love to be able to play. But here are a couple of little things I got from my mother. I freaked out the first time I realized I held my head in my hand the same way she did. And sometimes my voice sounds just like hers. So here's a little something my mother wrote in her autobiography about her parents. As you listen, think about this. Mama started writing when she was 7. Since she was born in 1917, that means she started writing in 1924. That's 100 years ago. Women couldn't vote until 1920. In 1924 in Chicago, you could get a loaf of bread for about 10 cents, a dozen eggs for 25 cents, and a Ford automobile for about $300. But before you get too excited, that's not as great as it sounds. By the end of the 1920s, teachers were only making about $2,000 a year. Here is my mother's piece, Parents. Home always warmly awaited us, welcoming, endorsing. Home meant a quick-walking, careful, duty-loving, never surly mother who had been a school teacher, who played the piano, sang in a high soprano, and wrote music to which I wrote the words, made fudge, made cocoa, and prune whip, and apricot pie. And I gotta stop and tell you, the apricot pie was awesome. I'm still trying to figure out how to make it. I can't quite do it like they did, but I'm working on it. She drew tidy cows and trees and expert houses with chimneys and chimney smoke, who helped her children with arithmetic homework. Home met my father, a janitor from McKinley Music Company. He had kind eyes, songs, and tense recitations for my brother and myself. We never tired of his stories and story poems. My father seemed to Gwendolyn and Raymond, that was my uncle, a figure of power. He had those rich artistic abilities, but he had more. He could fix anything that broke or stopped. He could build long-lasting fires in the ancient furnace below. He could paint the house inside and out, and could whitewash the basement. He could spread the American flag in wide, loud, clean magic across the front of our house on the 4th of July and on Declaration Day. He could chuckle. No one will ever have a chuckle exactly like my father's. It was gentle. It was warmly happy. It was heavyish, but not hard. It was secure and seemed to us an assistant to the power that registered with his children, always as magic. My father, too, was almost our family doctor. My father had wanted to be a doctor. He read every doctor book he could reach, learning fine secrets and curing us with steams and fruit compotes and rubs, and above all, with bedside compassion. "Well, there, young lady, how's that throat now? Well, let's see. This salve will take care of that bruise. Now we're going to be all right." You know, it's not just about learning from our parents. The things we're not allowed to do also help us make us who we are. From the time my mother was 4 until she got married, she lived in a house at 4332 South Champlain Avenue in Chicago. That house isn't there anymore, but it had a big front porch, a nice front yard, and a backyard too. My grandparents were very protective, though, about my mother. And so she could play in the front yard, but she didn't play in the backyard quite as much. And so she wanted to write a poem about the backyard. And she called it A Song in the Front Yard. I've stayed in the front yard all my life. I want to peek at the back, where it's rough and untended and hungry weed grows. A girl gets sick of a rose. I want to go to the backyard now, and maybe down the alley to where the charity children play. I want a good time today. They do some wonderful things. They have some wonderful fun. My mother sneers. But I say it's fine how they don't have to go in till 8:45. My mother, she tells me that Johnny May will grow up to be a bad woman, that George will be taken to jail soon or late. On account of last winter, he sold our back gate. But I say it's fine. Honest, I do. And I'd like to be a bad woman too, and wear the brave stockings of night black lace and strut down the streets with paint on my face. Who are you? You are the choices you make. Okay, so the first thing I have to do is tell you, before I talk about this next piece, I have to tell you that it is not safe to be the child of a poet, because they tell stories about you and about things you did, and then they publish them so everybody knows what you did. Like one Halloween, when I was like 8 or 9 or 10, I had a tiger costume. For some reason, I just wasn't happy with the tiger costume. So I went back in my bedroom and took out my nice white church gloves and put them on with the costume. When my mother saw me, she could not stop laughing. And she said, I'm going to write about this one day. And she did. She did. She wrote a poem about the choice I made that day and called it The Tiger Who Wore White Gloves. Here it is. There once was a tiger, terrible and tough, who said, I don't think tigers are stylish enough. They put on only orange and stripes of fierce black. Fine and fancy fashion is what they mostly lack. Even though they proudly speak most loudly, so that the jungle shakes and every eye awakes, even though they slither hither and thither in such a wild way that few may care to stay, to be so tough just isn't enough. These things the tiger said and growled and tossed his head and rushed to the jungle fair for something fine to wear. Then, what a hoot and yell upon the jungle fell! The rhinoceros rasped, the elephant gasped, by all that sainted, said wolf, and fainted. The crocodile cried, the lion sighed, the leopard sneered, the jaguar jeered, the antelope shouted, the panther pouted. Everyone screamed! We never dreamed there ever could be in history a tiger who loves to wear white gloves. White gloves are for girls with manners and curls, and dresses, and hats, and bow ribbons. That's the way it always was, and rightly so, because it's nature's nice decree that tiger folk should be not dainty, but daring, and wisely wearing what's fierce as the face, not whiteness and lace. They shamed him and shamed him, till none could have blamed him when at last, with a sigh and a saddened eye, and in spite of his love, he took off each glove, and agreed this was meant all to prevail. each tiger content with his lashing tail and satisfied with his strong striped hide. And that brings us to your next 2 for 2. It's time for you to choose. Remember, you're a world watcher now, and think about someone in your family, a mother, a father, a foster parent, a grandparent, a sister, brother, aunt, uncle. Think of something you've watched them do. Or, if you're thinking about the poem A Song in the Front Yard, write down something you've always wanted to be able to do, but you never did. Did another person stop you, or did you stop yourself? Or, if you're thinking about that tiger, what do you think about his choice? Do you think he should have kept the gloves or given them up? Why? Don't forget, 2 minutes and go. You can't watch the world if you're not watching what's happening in your community. Notice everything. A neighbor coming back from the grocery store. Are they walking down the street, getting out of a car, or jumping off of a bicycle? What are they wearing? Is your street mostly apartment buildings or mostly houses? Or do you live in a small town or on a farm where the next house is far away? The first poem I'm going to read to you in this section is my mother's best-known poem. It is called We Real Cool, and under the title, she adds The Pool Players, 7 at the Golden Shovel. She made up the name Golden Shovel, but there really was a pool hall just a couple of blocks from our house. It was on 75th Street in Chicago, just east of Cottage Grove Avenue. It was just a couple of doors down from my favorite hamburger place, Wimpy's, with the best cheese sauce a cheeseburger ever met. One day, during school hours, my mother walked past the hall and wondered about the young boys in there and why they weren't at school. She wondered about their lives in general, and that's why she wrote this poem. We real cool, the pool players, 7 at the Golden Shovel. We real cool, we left school, we lurk late, we strike straight, we sing sin, we thin gin, we jazz June, we die soon. And my mother said that she put the we at the end of the line before and said it with that breath because she felt that they were running out of time, and so running out of air. But boys in pool halls weren't the only things my mother watched. She also noticed homeless people, the unhoused. That's why she wrote a poem called An Old Black Woman Homeless and Indistinct. Here's a piece of that poem. See, here you are in the so busy world. You walk, you pass the people. No, the people pass you. Here's a rich girl marching briskly to her charms. She is suede and scarf and belting and perfume. She sees you not. She sees you very well. Some things my mother didn't have to wonder about. They happened for real, and they happened right in our neighborhood. Her poem, The Boy Died in My Alley, is based on exactly what happened right in the alley behind our home, 7428 South Evans in Chicago. She begins the poem with, The boy died in my alley without my having known. Policeman said next morning, apparently died alone. You heard a shot? Policeman said. Shots I hear and shots I hear. I never see the dead. And she ends the poem with, he cried not only father, but mother, sister, brother. The cry climbed up the alley. It went up to the wind. It hung upon the heaven for a long stretched strain of moment. The red floor of my alley is a special speech to me. Sometimes you create a character in a poem or a story just to say something you've always wanted to say. It's time for your two for you. And this one is all about people and the places we live in. So what about the people? Are they short or tall, thin or heavy, young or old? And how do you know these things about them? How do you describe the difference between a thin person and a heavy person? What makes you think somebody is young or old? And what about the buildings? Are they places where people live, where people shop, or a little bit of both? Are they brick or stone or wood or mostly glass? Are you thinking about a building that's old and crumbling or a shiny new building glistening in the sun? Close your eyes for a minute and think about a person or a place in your neighborhood. Describe everything you can think of about him, her, them, or it. Take your 2 minutes and write as much as you can. Go. There's a whole lot going on in the world today. So much it can sometimes be frightening. My mother followed the news day and night. She also watched shows about science and history. She watched soap operas too. But sometimes all that information could get a little frightening. Here's a poem sharing what she thought a little girl might feel about the goings on in the world. She called it A Little Girl's Poem. Life is for me and is shining. Inside me, I feel stars and sun and bells singing. There are children in the world all around me and beyond me, here and beyond the big waters, here and in the countries peculiar to me but not peculiar to themselves. I want the children to live and to laugh. I want them to sit with their mothers and fathers and have happy cocoa together. I do not want fire screaming up the sky. I do not want families killed in their doorways. Life is for us, for the children. Life is for mothers and fathers. Life is for the tall girls and boys in the high school on Henderson Street. It's for the people in African tents, the people in English cathedrals, the people in Indian courtyards, the people in cottages all over the world. Life is for us and is shining. We have a right to sing. That means you've got 3 choices for your 2 for you. You can write about one plant, animal, or object and describe it in a way that makes it beautiful. Or you can write a little something from the point of view of a dog or a raindrop or a car or a cloud or in anything. Or you can make a list of things in the world that worry or upset you and the things that you think you have the right to sing about. Ready? 2 minutes. Go. So much to write about. And my mother wanted to help. She put together a list of tips she called Young Poets Primer. And that primer is now in the book that was published by our company, Brooks Permissions, called Seasons, a Gwendolyn Brooks experience. I think it's a great bunch of tips for anybody who wants to write at any age. Here's one of her suggestions. Feel free to talk on your paper about anything, not just flowers and trees and springtime. Write about what you see on television and your honest response to it. Write about what you see in the street, what you see in the newspapers. Write about church, basketball and football, swimming, picnics, discos, horses, ants, rock music, hymns, the kitchen stove, coffee, tea, war, pancakes, milkshakes, Zimbabwe, love and hate, marbles, kites, blood, grape jelly, riots, Paris gowns and the fact that you do not have any, blue jeans, space, daisies and dandelions, orchids and the fact that you do not want any. Maybe you do. Teenagers, old people who are merely people who happen to have been around a long time and whom you're going to look like sooner than you think. Hospitals, prisons, sun-kissed oranges, McDonald's hamburgers, gardens, garbage cans, bicycles, Toyotas, sickness, health, your roots, grasshoppers, détente, an old tattered living room rug, Malcolm X, Mao, mice, mountains, and mercy. Jimmy Carter, the Ayatollah Khomeini. And about all or any of these subjects, write what you really think and feel. What you think. What you feel. And that brings us to our last writing moment. I'm calling it one and done because this time you have only 1 minute to make a list of your own of everything you might ever want to write about. Ready? Go. So now you've got a whole mess of ideas you can use for poems, stories, songs, or maybe even your first novel. What's the next thing to do? Dare to share. Today, tomorrow, next week, or next month. Share some of the bits and pieces you wrote down and listen to other people's bits and pieces. When you learn from others, you are a real world watcher. It's up to you now. Go ahead. Watch, learn, care, live.